Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Joel, I've got to say I have been looking forward to the show because I knew that Nikki was going to be joining us today. And the reason I've been looking forward to this is I can't wait to see the two of you interact. I mean, seriously, this is going to be fun. This is going to be really fun because I've been thinking a lot about that. And it's kind of appropriate because you also, you picked out a really cool topic for us, a book that comes from your extensive reading list called Hidden Potential, The Science of Achieving Greater Things. And I think that the relationships we're building here is an example of that hidden potential coming to fruition, coming out into the open. So it's just, it's like one wave after another of, yeah, this is all appropriate. I'm loving every second of this. So without further ado, hey, Nikki, welcome. How you doing?
Hello. I am doing very well. We got slammed with snow, as I've heard most of the country did this past week. But what I've learned is growing up in the Northeast that the Pacific Northwest doesn't really understand what to do with more than a couple of inches of snow. So now that it's melted on its own, we're finally getting back to generally normal activity.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, no, hey, at least you know what the limits are. That's a good thing.
Yep. And plus it makes me feel like I'm like a little ahead of the game because I actually just have shovels on hand if needed. Which shockingly, I love it. People don't.
Yeah. Well, I lived in the Northwest for a very short time, so it doesn't shock me at all, but congratulations. Well done.
You know.
Yeah. So good stuff. So Nikki, meet Joel. Joel, meet Nikki. And like I said, I've been looking forward to the two of you getting to know each other. Nikki, did I tell you Joel's story? I may not have. If I didn't,
I don't think so. I don't have a lot of backstory on you, Joel.
Then what I'm going to recommend, it's going to come out to some degree anyway, but I'm going to recommend him. I don't normally do this in the middle of a podcast, but I'm going to recommend him as a guest for your podcast so you can have that conversation.
Amazing.
Because his story will blow your mind. It really will.
Well,
and then you'll learn something too.
I'm just ramping back up into new.
There you go.
Gathering new guests. So I have an impending rebrand coming into play. So we're gonna ditch some of the profanity. Largely, it's very prohibitive to be getting the message out that I want to get out. But there's also a sort of personal brand values alignment that I want to.
You're not changing the podcast name, are you?
I am changing the podcast name.
Wow. What are you changing it to?
So this is little known at this point because I've just sort of started messaging it to new guests as I'm doing the intro calls. It's going to be called Can I Just Say? So I'm keeping the question mark icon that I have as part of the logo, which I've always really loved. It's this question mark that looks like it has sort of a podcast in the middle, or a podcast microphone in the middle of it. But the reason I'm changing it, aside from the sort of prohibitive nature of profanity being in my title and being able to cross promote that, is because I was feeling a little bit disconnected from the reason that I created the show under the name Who the Fuck, was really asking myself the question, like, who am I? And it's been 4 years. I've talked to so many people. I've gained a lot of perspective. I feel pretty confident about who I am now, which is a really nice sense of growth. But also that I see Can I Just Say as an opportunity. First of all, my wife pointed this out to me. I had no idea that I did this, and now I can't unknow it. So now I've turned it into a brand. So whenever I compliment somebody, apparently, especially if I don't know them that well, I start with can I just say? And then I proceed to speak to whatever truth I'm feeling in that moment. And then it sort of evolved into this idea of, well, that's how I initiate conversations. That's how I create connections, and that's also how I want to invite people in, So if somebody leads with, can I just say, for me, the answer is an emphatic yes, you can say, let's talk about it. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I'm still refining the messaging, but the look and feel will be pretty similar. It's really just a matter of kind of massaging the brand into something that feels like it fits more with where I am now and the potential growth of the show. So it's a little bittersweet because I know that there was a lot of positive feedback about the name. I actually never really got negative feedback about it, but there are limitations that I don't want to be held back by. So I have to just consider that.
I get that, but can I just say I really like the old name?
Well played, Walt. Well played. Yeah, I do too. And it's something that I debated on actually for probably close to like 8 months now. I've been going back and forth. I had a different name for a little while. I actually like bought the URL for a different name that I was toying with. And I was just like, it just doesn't feel right. And I think the reality for me is I can really embody the mindset of, can I just say, it's the moments when I randomly compliment somebody who doesn't expect it, who doesn't know me. I've like walked past them and recognized something in them that I want to share with them. I really believe that there's a path to helping people see the value of random acts of kindness or being considerate of other people in these sort of micro interactions that we have that can proliferate in a way that, won't really or doesn't create a barrier to having the conversation. So it's a little bit of a more gentle introduction to the show as opposed to just like, who the fuck, but that doesn't mean that it's not really at the core of it.
Interesting backtrack at the end there. I like that. But yes, I get what you're saying. And I have to give you a little bit of thanks too, because in the past year, I think there are probably 4 episodes where I used the word fuck, and 3 of them were the ones that you were on. So you're
so
helping
privileged
to clean up my act. I appreciate that. So Joel, you got a sense of what Nikki is like. She's going to learn more about what you're like, but you also got to you got to help us get on to track here, because we're also here to talk about this book that you found, Hidden Potential. So give us a lead up to it. Tell us about, what are we talking about here?
I found this really interesting. Is I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and like 100 a year kind of thing, and so I'm always getting new stuff. This one really, I like the concept. I like the general where it started. It's about unleashing hidden potential, not just the obvious. There's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of people that are that are obviously the people that are great at what they do, but there's a lot of people that there's a lot of hidden potential that don't necessarily ever have an opportunity to display that. So unlocking hidden potential just talks about the different concepts, like for example, kids that are super smart and they do well academically and they expect to get really high grades, and they always have gotten really high grades. So that's fantastic. But the kids that have to learn a little extra, how that works for them is when they're rewarded, when kids that are given the reward for effort versus the reward for success, their response is so that's sort of an unlocking of potential. It's a very smart kid that gets good grades. The moment he's challenged beyond that level, they often quit. They're very scared. They don't want to push further. But kids that learn the other way, that are challenged by, hey, you didn't do too well, but look at that incredible effort. Look where you've improved. Looking for effort of improvement or areas of improvement really helps their self-esteem and makes them try harder. And that's how people get their hidden potential unlocked. I had a teacher when I was in 10th grade. I'll never forget this. She's a biology teacher. Nikki, I have really bad or really good ADHD, depending on what you want to look at.
Same.
But yeah, thank you. And I love it now, but when I was in 10th grade, I did not love it. Let me be clear. It was not good. And I didn't really.
May I ask? Sorry.
Yes.
I assume just kind of, I know I had a late in life diagnosis. I'm 38. And so
Yes.
it wasn't really commonplace to be diagnosed even at my age. And
Oh, it's certainly not
as
mine.
a female,
Yeah.
I was going to
Yeah.
ask, you probably didn't have that diagnosis when you were
No,
younger, I assume.
no, absolutely not. No, and I was lazy, according to the psychologist. I was very smart, but I was lazy and unmotivated was my diagnosis. And I absolutely lived to that diagnosis for a long time. So in 10th grade, I ran across this biology teacher, and I did not care at all about school. I understood you had to go, but my effort wasn't there. I wasn't interested. But she was able to. She figured out a way to challenge me. She figured out a way to unlock my hidden potential. And so, in one of the hardest biology classes that were offered at our school, I got the first perfect 100% of she's ever given. And she found a way to challenge me by rewarding my effort, by challenging, the disbelief. You're like, I can't learn this. And she goes, well, clearly you can learn this. She had ways of challenging me. She said, that's not your best effort. And we got to a point where this is my favorite teacher of all time, because she was able to pull out my hidden potential. And even though it wasn't really hidden, I had hidden it because the definitions that I was given of how my brain worked is something I just accepted. That I'm lazy. I don't care, and I'm unmotivated. So that's just what I live to. She challenged me. And so learning for me, the idea that I had to figure out a way to unlock my potential and what works for me. So one of my theories, Nikki, is I'm a big fan of failure. I love failure. Failure is a great learning tool. I fail every day in the gym. I just fail. I work for failure. And on the surface, that sounds incredibly negative, but I failing is a great tool for me because if I'm not failing every day, I'm not trying hard enough. I want to fail. So the brain's neuroplasticity is at its greatest after failure. So people who fail and give up don't take advantage of the neuroplasticity. People that fail and don't give up and keep going and are driven by that failure are the ones that unlocks a lot of hidden potential. So learning that concept that learning to not use failure as the old saying in most sports, like failure is not an option. It's like, well, then you're not going to get anywhere. Failure has to be an option. I work with a young lady right now. She's 14 and she's a gymnast, and she has the greatest perspective and she's world-class gymnast. She has the greatest perspective of failure that I've ever seen. She said, I fail 99.9% of the time. To get to the level that I'm at, I'm always failing. You can't get great without failure in gymnastics. You just don't go do gymnastics at that level and not fail. So failure instructs. And again, the perspective of this really matters. But the book gets into all the different concepts. Are you familiar with the Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, that book?
Yep.
The same concept. The rewarding effort, giving that they're encouraging the resilience model is such an effective tool. So unlocking hidden potential is empowering people to make decisions, empowering people to participate in the process. Some of the greatest discoveries that have ever been made have been made from the least, apparently the not the smartest people in the room, but the other people in the room that were given the opportunity to put their opinions out there.
And the persistence, a lot of times, right? To your point.
Yes, absolutely. That's what you're teaching. The incremental improvements that take place with the persistence and not giving up because you've been pushed back on is really sort of the ultimate key to success. And so unlocking hidden potential brings a lot to the table with that.
Wow. Well, I have many thoughts on that.
Awesome. You would.
So first thing I'm going to say is Walt was right. This is going to be great. It already is. So I have a lot of thoughts specifically around the sort of the story that we tell ourselves related to being able to unlock that potential. I forget what the statistic is. The two numbers that are coming to mind are like 13,000 and 20,000. It's somewhere in that range roughly of how many more negative pieces of feedback kids with ADHD get by the time. Maybe it's 20,000 more pieces of negative feedback by the time you're 13 or something like that. If you have ADHD, and I think particularly if it's undiagnosed, because people don't understand why you are the way you are, why you're doing things the way that you're doing them. And so it seems atypical. And then therefore you're getting, much like you did and I did as well in school, kind of criticized for not being in line with what the expectations were. I was lucky that I was able to do well for myself in school. My mom was really supportive in that my parents expected and wanted us to do well, but there was also the mindset of, we know that not everybody learns the same way, and that if there were different things that we needed to do to help myself or my sister understand things, that they would go that route and they would try to help us navigate that. And so I think it is really important to have those teachers, those parents, those role models in our lives who do step in and help us see that within ourselves, because it's really easy for that negative self-talk to persist throughout our lives. And even now, I mean, I certainly still deal with it. Getting the diagnosis of ADHD in my early 30s, and then I was working at Amazon at the time. And it was one of those things where I felt like I could finally go into meetings and explain where it might be challenging sometimes to work with me because of XYZ, but here's what I bring to the table. And so now like we can figure out how to work best together because I understand myself well enough to be able to explain it to you so you have context and you're not just like, God, she like I can't even think of specifically what it would be at this moment, but something annoying that I do for when I'm working with other people. And, you know, and it kind of makes it easier to manage expectations with people, to be able to just know that. And the other piece of what you said that I really loved, was it also brings it back to sort of my product management days, is the idea of failing being a learning resource. For sure, that is true, because one of the things that we always say in tech is like, you want to fail fast, because if you prolong the inevitable, which is that you're going to do this thing and it's not going to be perfect, because nothing you ever do, especially in technology, is perfect.
Especially in technology.
Like, there's just no way. You could sit there and you can spin your wheels for ages and say, we've done all the research, we think we've nailed it, and you put it out there, and people who use it are like, this is the part that sucks. And so you're like, oh, okay, great. Well, there goes, you know, however many years of my life or months of my life that you were committed to. So I think it is really about taking the ego out of it and understanding that a lot of times we perceive failure as feedback about who we are as a person, when in reality, it's feedback about a circumstance more often than not. And maybe a way that we reacted, or something that we did that maybe wasn't the best version of ourselves. But again, it is about the reflection and the clarity that you get from that. So I'm totally on board with that. And the other thing that I wanted to say, related to your comment around becoming a world-class athlete, a gymnast, for example, it makes me think about, I've gone surfing twice in my life, and I'm okay for a very novice person on an easy wave. But what I realized was something that I enjoy doing that brings me peace, that like I don't do nearly enough, and I've started doing again recently, is watching like actually really good surfers surf. And so I'll put on some videos and just kind of vibe with like whatever it is that's happening, and realizing these amazing surfers, the best surfers in the world, don't catch every wave. They wipe out. They have to get back and do it again. Like, if you are a perfectionist, you're not a surfer, right? Like, that's just not real. So I think that there's a lot to be learned from people who do accelerate their lives and their careers in certain directions, to note that what we see is not the full journey. We see the manifestation of all of those failures that they took and used as learning opportunities to make it successful for them. And there's probably, I mean, pretty much guaranteed, still failures that are happening, and we're just not necessarily witness to that.
Absolutely. And that's the mindset that, you know, I work with a lot of clients. I work with all types, but a lot of my clients are young males with ADHD, and they reprogramming that inner negative dialogue that has been placed because of their, you know, what their perceived expectations were, what they've been told, how they do things, and you know, teaching them how to learn that brain and learn that failure is an effort. One of the things I do, one of the many things I do, is I do consulting for businesses, mainly for addiction to treatment clinics. That's sort of my background. But I do a lot of things, but that one is the one that I do most of my consulting with. And what I like to do is, there's an example of one program. They wanted to implement an IOP program, intensive outpatient program. And this is a very complicated process. You have all these groups, and you have all the curriculum, and you can imagine getting it has to be approved by the state and all. And so this guy hired me. He said, we've been working on this for 6 months, and we haven't gotten it launched, and we would like to hire you to help us get it launched. Our goal is 2 months. And this was on a Thursday afternoon. I said, that's not an acceptable goal at all. He said, well, do you need longer? And I go, no, we're going Monday. We're going live Monday. And I put a bunch of groups in place. We launched it. And of course it was flawed, but what I did was I called it stress. I stressed the system. We found out where the flaws were. We kept adjusting. At the end of that first week, we had a flawlessly run program that would have taken them, they've been working on for 6 months, because I used sort of that concept that we're speaking of here. Let's go, let's dive in, let's do it. Yeah. Knowing it's not going to be perfect, but where are the flaws? Where are the hiccups? It's easier once they've been exposed to correct them, instead of the theoretical approach of this is how it works. So that's that, you know, so that same thing is sort of what you're speaking to there. It's just a great way of doing things. And our brain is that type of brain that thrives on that concept as well.
Yeah, and it reminds me of one of the key takeaways from a coaching program my wife and I just did for 12 weeks, where it's like messy success is better than perfect mediocrity. And it's like, just
Yes.
put it out there, just because
Yeah.
the only way that you can gain clarity is by taking the action and reflecting on it. You can't just, I feel like we seek to have this innate clarity. I mean, I certainly do, even just with this rebrand we were talking about. I was spinning my wheels and I'm like flipping over rocks and looking for the right thing, and I just can't figure it out. And it's like the most obvious answer was the thing that is happening around me all of the time, but it requires us to kind of give ourselves the opportunity to feel the discomfort of what's also wrong. And I think that's kind of what failure does for us as well, is like a failure isn't necessarily this didn't work. It might be this doesn't feel right.
Right.
Because it's not always a tangible outcome that you're gearing towards. It
Right.
might just be a thing that you feel like being in an environment with certain people doesn't feel right. Okay, I
Right.
mean, technically a failure, right? But it's more like it's just more data that you can use to decide what you like, don't like, want to do, and don't want to do.
Right. Completely. And I love that. I love that because when you said my brain won't let go of this, so I got to say this.
Yeah,
When you said messy success, that I need a T-shirt. Messy success. That's
on
it.
your way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we need to brand that. I want that. That is. I love that because
It'll just say
I've
I'm a
been.
messy success, and then
I
that's
am
it.
a messy success, certified messy success, and I got there in a very messy manner, and operate pretty much so, and it's okay. It works fine for me. But that everything to me, I say this every week on our podcast, is perspective dictates everything,
Mm,
and your ADHD brain, your perspective of it is how it works. And failure, how your perspective of failure, how it works, and that internal dialogue is probably the most underrated uh, concept of mental health that there is because you're in charge of that internal dialogue. And a lot of people don't realize it was programmed for you when you were a child, and society then programs it for you, especially your teen years, and those with disabilities or ADHD or anything they perceive to be different. That's often programmed in there as well. So reprogramming that to where your anticipation, like I am very excited to have an ADHD brain. If you were to give me a magical tool that said you can have a neurotypical brain tomorrow, I would run from that cure. I really would. And that's most people don't understand that. I have learned to. I can't imagine giving up this brain. It's
Well, I
amazing.
think that, yeah, I think one of the things that really helped me embrace it once I understood it more, because there was a stigma, there was totally a
Right.
stigma associated with it. Um, and it's because the systems aren't built to help people who have neurodiversities learn in ways that are most effective for them. It's more like
Right.
we succeed despite the systems that are in place, not really because of them. And I think for me, it was a recognition that, oh, if I lean into that part of myself, I can accelerate so much faster. I can move a lot quicker. And by the way, if I'm in a hyper focus mode, it's the best because I can do like 3 times the work in a quarter of the time. And I'm like, this
Absolutely.
is what I desire. I don't want to be somebody who has to sit there and do it for the actual amount of time it probably should take. Now, does that mean
Yes.
that I forget things that I should do, like call the doctor or do these other things that are on my to-do list? Yeah, probably. So I have to be more in tune with where those challenges with my executive function are so that I can still operate as a human being who does life at least to a reasonable extent well. But it's a great gift, I think, to understand a diagnosis of something like ADHD instead of because for me it was like a retrospective on my life when I got the diagnosis, and I looked back and I was like, oh, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense now. I
Yeah.
don't tell people about this because I feel like they know. And it was a lot of not surprised people being like, that makes sense. That makes total sense for you. So I even just the way that I have to show up when I'm doing my podcast, I I had friends who said to me when they listened for the first time that they were surprised how slowly I speak and that I was able to listen as well as I did, because a big part of my ADHD, Walt's probably experienced this a couple times, is my impulsivity to like say the thing. And because I'm like so eager and I'm excited and it's like, ooh, dial it down. But sometimes I can't. And I try to be really respectful and understanding of when I do it. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for interjecting, or, being conscious of it and acknowledging it so somebody doesn't think I'm just being rude. But also knowing that I can say, hey, this is part of who I am. And I do my best to like maintain it in a way that makes it so other people have space to feel seen and heard. I also don't always get it right. So, it's sort of take me for who I am. I'm doing the same with other people and with myself. Honestly, sometimes I'm like, Nikki, just why are you like this? But here we are and we're doing it.
I love that.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, this is so cool because this is exactly what I was expecting, this kind of interplay. And then I realized, I finally realized what the flaw though is. The flaw is I haven't said anything for 20 minutes.
Is that really a flaw, Walt?
It's like, when do I stop talking so Walt can say something?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest,
it
Walt,
depends on your viewpoint, Joel. I mean, from my viewpoint, I'm used to talking and like I'm not talking. Like, okay, this is unusual.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily saying that's bad. I'm just saying, I'm putting that out there, okay? I mean,
no, actually, what occurs to me is that the title is Hidden Potential. It's the title of the book that we're drawing our show from today, and it occurred to me,
right?
Yes, Adam Grant.
It occurs to me that actually I kind of flip that. I do this a lot, by the way, Nikki. I kind of flip that around in my mind, and I say to myself, the title is actually Uncovered Actuality. Because that's really what we're talking about. That's what you guys are talking about, how you uncovered actuality in a messy, messy way, but it came out.
Yeah,
because really that's what matters. It didn't matter so much whether or not it was potential or whether or not it was done perfectly. It's that it came out.
Absolutely.
I like that.
That's the point. Yeah. Walt likes to attack the titles every week. I don't know why, but he does
fun.
that.
What can I say? It's fun.
All right. So Walt, here's what I'm hearing is when I write my book, whenever that happens, it's as one of my friends said, I'm flirting with the idea of it, which is very true. But I feel like now I'm going to have to run some titles by you before I settle on anything so that I know that when I come to talk to you about it, we can just be like, that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea.
Walt Thiessen approved.
Well, if you really do want to follow through on that one, my recommendation is do it on one of my podcast episodes. You probably won't get the same kind of reaction out of me in a private conversation.
Fair enough.
Just saying, just kind of fair warning.
Spot, just real time feedback.
Exactly. Yeah. And forewarned is forearmed. That's the way I look at it.
Yes, I love that.
But getting back to the topic here, the idea of uncovering actuality and bringing it out into the open. The subtitle of the book was The Science of Achieving Greater Things. I wonder if also we can rewrite that one. I wonder if it becomes the science of achieving whatever it is we're trying to achieve. It doesn't have to be greater.
What is greater? What is greater? I think to some extent that's it often. To me, the idea of greater implies we're always moving the goalpost, which is true. Mm-hmm. I do think that because we're constantly evolving, the goalpost is typically always moving. But sometimes it might not even be the same sport. Like you might be in a different part of your life where it's not a goalpost that's moving. I don't know how to make that a better analogy, so I'm going to stop there. But I do think that there is this reality that greater things. We think like, I want more for myself. I want bigger. I want better. I want more extensive, more expansive. And maybe that's sort of what I'm getting at is, for me, the idea of greater is more expansive. It's something that fills me up more, something that gives me the opportunity to think differently about things, to invite new things in, to share more with other people. Like, it's the culmination of all of these little bits and pieces that really drives that evolution within ourselves. So greater being a bit more of sort of a, it's such an ambiguous word, whereas I feel like expansive is sort of like you're pulling in a lot of parts of what's around you and allowing that to help you grow.
And I completely concur with that. Also, there's a reverse of this. As we were talking, how to, the almost reverse concept is I have a young man that I've been working with for a while. He's 15 years old now. And he's this really great kid. He does well in school. I love talking to him. He's great talking to adults. He's very awkward with kids. He very clearly has Asperger's syndrome. Okay. It's real clear. But very functioning. I love this kid. So his mom called me and she said, I want to get him officially diagnosed. And I'm saying, please don't. he's functioning well. And she said, well, his grades are A's and B's. He's checking every box. He has a part-time job. He's in sports. He's very happy. And she was listening to her therapist, who said, we really need to get a diagnosis, and we need to get it locked in for future services or whatever we need. So they do. Well, all of a sudden, now everything's falling apart. This kid now, he's like, oh, I didn't know I was autistic. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. He's totally shot his self-esteem. And I'm trying to rebuild that. Nothing has changed, but that idea that he has been told you're broken, you're autistic, and that's, he can't let go of that. He's like, so anything that goes wrong, before he used to figure it out, now he's like, it's not my fault, I have Asperger's. So it's totally changed it. It's reversed it of what we're talking about. It goes in either direction. You can unlock hidden potential, and you can also stuff your potential back in when you feed it the wrong information too.
Yeah, it's interesting how that's playing out. I'm curious if he were younger or older, like on either side of sort of the age range that he is right now, if it would play out differently. Because one of the things that I've talked about in therapy a lot is this moment in my life where I was isolated from my friend group. Incidentally, they thought I was a lesbian, and that ended up being very true. But it was like, at the time I was like 12 or 13, and it was the time in my life where social acceptance and connection is so critical. Like, that feels life and death, right, in your teen years.
Right.
And so there was no way that after that, it actually, I think, kept me in the closet longer, because I was so afraid to actually show up the way that I would have. Now, this was also, again, like 25 years ago. So it wasn't the way that it is now, where I think people are more comfortable being younger and sharing that. But I do feel like that age range is, you're already kind of challenging everything that you think about yourself and really connecting to other people's perceptions of who you are. It's probably, I would say, in my experience, and I'm curious if either of you feel this way, I think that was the least secure I've ever felt in my life, was like my early teen years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by far for me. Yes.
So it's like, absolutely. I think that like getting that diagnosis at that age probably is screwing with the way he feels about himself more than it would at other points in his life. Because
that was my point. Exactly. It's like, this point in time, we don't need to do this. Let's address it when this is the worst time to give him this diagnosis. It's the worst time.
Yeah, it's like self-shaming about something that really doesn't need to be a shameful thing, but it's like, it's also the most defiant stages of our lives, other than probably being toddlers. So it creates, I think, a dynamic within yourself that is just kind of contradictory and chaotic. And because when you were starting to say, I said, I don't think we should, like, it's that now is not the time. I was like, shouldn't he, know that? Isn't that important? Doesn't that help him kind of understand more about what he's going through? And now I'm sitting here going, no, I think that that's reasonable, that like you need to find the right way to address it and give them space to process it, and really make sure that you're reinforcing as a parent or mentor or whomever, that this is not something that detracts from who you are. It's something that is part of who you are. And it's okay to be accepting of that. And in fact, I think more people now, the same thing with ADHD. I think there's a lot to be said for the good things that can come with the way somebody who is autistic shows up in the world and the things that they can do and create. And it's just as with everything, it's a journey.
I agree.
Isn't there another thing here too? The other thing is that there was more than one person's need in consideration. And in the story that you told, Joel, the need that was being addressed wasn't the need of the 15-year-old. It was the need of the mom.
Yeah.
And there's a very strong tendency to blur that boundary, that if a mom or a dad feels that the child needs something, then it's associated as being the child's need. It really isn't. It really isn't.
Well, right. And that's you see that a lot. I mean, I'm not being critical of moms. That's almost a natural instinct.
Or dad, for that matter.
Yeah, but there's in my case, what I work on is if the system is flowing and you're happy, this is one of the happiest kids I've ever worked with. Always, why introduce a concept at this point, at the most critical point of time? Why introduce that concept? He wasn't asking. He wasn't floundering. He wasn't seeking that information. He thought he was just right there in the middle with everybody else.
Right.
And so, at some point, obviously, we need to let you know this is how your brain works, and it could affect your social interactions, especially later in adult years. But right now, when you're in the wheelhouse and you're knocking life out of the park and you're 15 years old, probably not the best time to bring that to the table. And we often tend to we can live to our diagnosis as well. So there's a lot of concepts in what we're looking at. I think there's always an individual, what matters individually. And the young man's doing pretty good right now. We've worked our way back to let's delete that for right now. Let's get back to what you were doing right beforehand. Let's start checking those boxes. Let's doing that. And I said, your friends don't know that you have this. And then he says, yeah, I told them all. I said, oh, okay, well, so now his friends have started treating him a little differently as well. We're working on that. He's going to be fine. It's just so much of what takes place in our brain, what we think about ourselves, what we think about our environment, what we think about, on a daily basis really dictates reality. And so controlling that to a place where, that positive perspective, or, I have like I was talking about earlier about my position on failure, or I just view life a lot differently than other people. I get up and just I really work on my mindset. I don't leave the house without my mindset being adjusted to where I'm at. My ADHD for me, as I said earlier, is I mean, that is a superpower. I really live that mindset. I owe a lot of my success to having that. And I believe that. So everything we're saying sort of collides in the same place, that so much of this internal stuff, that dialogue that we take place dictates just how you feel on a daily basis about yourself. When you were young and you're hearing all that, and, am I a lesbian? Don't want to be a lesbian, so I'm going to not be a lesbian. And then it's created
like
more than you
just
need.
like not even, I'm going to tell you, that was a big failure on my part. That just was like, that's happening anyway. Tough luck.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of the point. It isn't an option, but when you're at that age, your brain's doing that to you. So that's
stuff it away, like you said.
Yes.
Something that you said earlier that brought me back to our last conversation when we were on my show, Walt, was just how important it is to really understand and look for the things that are happening in our subconscious when we can access that. Because I mean, that was a big part of how you got to where you were, and even doing this show, was that you weren't satisfied with the way your life was going. You were like, I can't keep having it be this way. What am I going to do to change it? And it required, kind of chipping away and being like, well, what is it? Where are the parts that I need to address? Where are the places I need to give more attention to? And that's how you, when you shared with me, like, that's how you really started to consider more around like the law of attraction and a life of abundance, those mindsets. It's like, once you can kind of, I think the self-awareness is the number one thing. Beyond anything else that I've learned in therapy and all of the help, self-improvement things that I've consumed over time, because I'm also a big audiobook person. It's like the self-awareness is the starting point. If you don't have the self-awareness, if you're unwilling to go there, you're going to stay where you are. And I heard something the other day, or read something the other day, that was like, the amount that you're able to grow or heal is directly proportionate to the amount of vulnerability that you're willing to show, and the amount of access you're willing to give yourself to who you truly are. It was worded more succinctly and probably better than that, but just like, if we can look inward and really evaluate with honesty and giving ourselves grace instead of with shame, then you start to, really gain momentum into feeling that you're doing the right things and that you have access to that potential that we're talking about.
Yeah, I like
I
that.
love that. Yeah.
I'd also add something else in, which is, I think it's about being selective. And I'm saying that in the same context as the point that I raised earlier about whose problem was it? Was it the kid's problem, or was it the mom's problem in that particular instance? And the reason I brought that in is, we humans, maybe I won't make a generalization. Maybe I'll just make it about myself. I'm really, really good at creating problems. I can create problems out of thin air. I can create problems that nobody else has even thought of that could possibly exist. And I will create them like 5 in a row in the course of 3 minutes. I'm that good at it. I'm pretty sure most people are good at it in the same way.
I would concur with that.
Yeah. So the question that comes to my mind is, well, doesn't it pay then to be selective about what problems we're going to create? I mean, it's not like we're lacking the skill. We already know how to do it. Why don't we just become more selective about it? Because isn't that what the messy approach is?
Mm-hmm.
It's deciding which problem I'm going to go after next and how I'm going to go after it. And it doesn't matter whether I screw up on the way, I'm just going to go after it.
Yeah.
That's the selective side of it. So to me, it's all about being selective. What am I going to give my attention to? What am I going to focus on? How am I going to deal with it? And am I going to change my mind 5 minutes from now?
Where your energy goes, where your attention goes, your energy flows, right? Like that's the
That's
whole
right.
mindset.
Yeah.
And it's so simple. It's like little things like that people say all the time, or posts you see that say these same things. But if it were so simple for us to grasp that and just go with it, we would be doing it. We wouldn't need millions of people saying these things or for us to be having these conversations. But it's the relatability of these conversations and the desire to create the connection one conversation at a time, one individual at a time, that starts to really create more, I think, visibility for people to say, oh, well, I never thought of it that way. Or am I maybe missing out on some of my potential? Like what's an example of something where maybe I'm not meeting myself where I should be? And I think that it's really powerful to know that even just having a dialogue like this is something that like you can get the right person at the right time, that moment in their life, and they're like, oh, I heard that, and now something's clicked and everything changes. And I think to your point, in the start of the conversation, Joel, it's like it's reading books like this and then having the conversation with a friend or on a podcast or your significant other or something, and being like, I'm not just holding on to this for me, but I want to discuss it. I want to share what I've learned, and I want to, digest it and process it with other people and see even what more can be extracted from that in a way that's meaningful.
That's fantastic. You're right. And something you said along the way, the connectivity between people and energies is such an important. Uh, Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich talks about mastermind groups, where you get like-minded people, or not even like, just a group of people, and discuss wild ideas or concepts. And that is a really effective way to unlock hidden potential in anyone, because once you like, I love meeting with people because my brain never stops. I always have something going, but I love to hear other people spin, because that gets my brain going in a different direction. And ideas will pop into my head when I hear other people's. So I love that idea, that connectivity of the more we're around people sharing ideas, sharing concepts like that, the more we can accept it, the more we can implement these things we want to do. I'm in a wonderful position in life. I get up every day. I get to go to work. I know everybody says that, but I don't have to work. I love what I do with a passion. I'm very busy. I have a million things going on. I love it. It's what I want to do. So I get up every day with purpose. And I would say I don't need an alarm clock. I get up every day with that energy, and I wouldn't trade my life for anyone's life. That is not always been the case. I mean, if we ever talk in depth, it certainly wasn't the case for a long time. But all that had to be reprogrammed in my subconscious programming to get to a place where I see it that way. I do better when I'm with a group of people, like-minded people, us three talking right now. That's my best way of accessing that energy to move forward and change and grow and become greater than, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I agree 100%. I mean, I think Walt and I really tapped into that in the conversation that we had, where it was like we both started podcasts because that was something that we felt could not only help us grow, but because it felt good to do it.
Right.
It feels
Exactly.
good
Yeah.
just to have that space. It doesn't need to be more than the purpose that it serves for us interacting and having these moments. Because I'm very much like you in that I thrive in these situations. I've struggled as I was like going through this whole concept of like, okay, I'm going to rebrand and I need to be more, I need to find ways for me to create content that resonates with people from a place of me just thinking about things that I think about, not solely me interacting with other people. I have a lot of very interesting thoughts, I think, that go on about my head. And if I just, had the confidence or the reassurance in myself to put it out there, I would do it. But there's something for me that I've always felt is inorganic when it's like I'm holding the camera in front of my face and I need to say something and I'm like, where did all of my original thoughts go? Versus sitting here and talking to people and being like, all we have to do is flow with each other, let the conversation go where it may. And it's there's a big reason why this is my third time that I've been on this show with Walt, and why I had him on my show, because it was so easy from the instant that, the mics went on to be able to just chat. And I think people sometimes really underestimate, like, if you don't do this regularly, which clearly we all do, if you don't do this regularly, I feel like there are so many people that like can't even grasp the amount of growth and joy and gratitude that comes from this type of connection, just conversation.
Well, they do grasp it to the extent that they listen to it. I mean, podcasting has become huge. The number of people listening to podcasting is gigantic. But I totally agree. It's actually better when you're participating in it. You get more value. Not that you don't get any value out of listening. You get lots of value out of listening, but you get even more when you're actually involved in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I want the conversation that I have to be a little bit of the fly on the wall vibe. I've had friends and listeners who I don't even know say to me how impactful it is to hear those conversations, and that you feel like you're sitting in a room with friends who, like, I'm possibly just meeting the person that I'm talking to, so there's something to be said for the fact that when you feel safe to express things and to be vulnerable and open. And vulnerable doesn't have to be deep, seated, this is my trauma vulnerable, although I do go there a lot. But like there is that ability to just say, I am who I am and I'm going to show up as I am. And there's something to be discussed. Let's go and do that.
Yes. I love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. One of the things I also love too is when we have a show like this where we've got 3 people involved. I've said this off the air many times, and I say it sometimes on the air. I love how the energy works. Like when I look at the conversation that we've been having now for going on 47 minutes, something like that. I think about how that flow went. Now I introduced the show. That's the way I always do it, and I brought both of you in, and Nikki kind of gave you some grounding so you could be a part of, feel like you're part of the show for today. And then you and Joel took off on the ADHD thing, which I loved, which was just fabulous. But that's where the energy needed to go right then. And then the energy went over to me, well, hey, I feel like I'm out of this, so I got to come back into this. So I jumped in with my thing. And then we kind of circumnavigated around a few other things, came back to refine and refocus. And all of that accomplished was to give ourselves and our listeners new ways of thinking about the same things we've been talking about for the past 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. In other words, we keep looking at it from a different angle. And isn't that what exploration is? It's looking at things over and over again from a different angle. And every time you look at it from a different angle, you try something with it. It doesn't quite work. So you try something else that doesn't quite work. That's the failure thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it worked. And one of the things that, Nikki, one of the things I'm an advocate for here in Virginia is I'm advocating for the therapeutic use of psilocybin. I know out in the Northwest, that's not that uncommon, but here it still is. And this is the concepts that when you look at what psilocybin does for the brain, it opens it up even more to these things that we're talking about. So when you get there's a study Harvard was doing of some of the stuff, and when people are on psilocybin, the brains open up similarly to those that are in a really aggressive, or not aggressive, but a really quality group discussion. There's a lot of the same pathways that open up. There's a lot of people report the same feeling of connection. And so, it's that there's a natural, almost antidepressant release when you really connect with another person. There's an energy. You pick up that energy. I didn't know you 45 minutes ago, but it's like, okay, I know her. We're there. And,
totally.
Yeah.
That's the gift of doing this too.
Yeah. I don't even need a lot of background. I already know we're good. And Walt's another story, by the way. We'll
get into that another time.
Yeah. But seriously, this is such a the energy of this concept, beyond unlocking human potential or greater potential, is the connection between people is where that always exists. The ultimate unlocking of anything comes when you're connected. When you're disconnected, you're really disconnected from source. When source energy is, I don't know what you believe and stuff like that, but I believe
You're
being
talking to the
connected.
right person in the right
Okay,
words.
good.
You got it.
Okay, good. So we already know that. But a form of allowing source energy to speak is the collective of all of us talking. That compounds that connection. The more we do that, the more power that connection has, and that's the ultimate unlocking of anything for humans, in my mind.
Well, so I love that you went there because for me, it's all of it. Like that's all I've ever really wanted in doing this podcast. When I started therapy, it was because I was miserable at the job that I was at. But my thought was I need to figure out like what my purpose is. And so I remember right before I started the podcast that I was like, I know that my purpose is to connect with people. I don't know what that looks like yet. And I'd blogged a little bit. And what I realized, as with many of the other failed blogs that I had, and not failed because like I did something that I tried and they kept failing. It was like I just gave up on them. And I think that to that point, there's actually a difference between failing and like choosing to stop something.
Yeah, that's two totally different concepts there. Yeah,
Very good. I love that.
And so I realized like I don't feel connected to people when I'm writing something and there's no response back.
Yes.
It's like I need there to be, even if it is just talking to a screen and then there's community somewhere else that's coming and consuming what you're doing, right? There is a sense of connectedness that comes with that, something that's far more interactive and less stagnant. I feel like words on a page are very different than a dynamic conversation. It's why when I was going through a really significant part of this healing journey after leaving an abusive relationship and losing my mom, I started writing and then almost instantly stopped and was like, throw on my headphones, hit record, and whatever comes out, comes out. Maybe I use it, maybe I don't, it doesn't matter. But I just need to like put it out there and feel myself say it and allow space to it. And when you do that and you have other people who are part of that, as you were saying, it is all about perspective. It gives you, the opportunity to perceive things from different angles, to grow through even your own recognition of the statements that you're making. And be more conscious of like what your actual thoughts are instead of trying to be like, oh, well, let me phrase that perfectly, or let me try to pander to what I think somebody else wants to hear or say or wants me to say. And there's a freedom that comes with really genuine connection, like what you're saying. You don't need to know somebody for very long to get a sense of who they are if they show up and they know themselves well enough.
That to me, that is my normal daytime job is I'm a life coach, and connection is my modality. I've always said I started with a form of motivational interviewing, and I use cognitive behavioral coaching and stuff. But the true thing that is connection with people, making a connection with another person is the ultimate coaching, because you're able to bring them to you, that energy to you, share energy with them, and that makes a difference. I'm not just sitting there with a preconceived checklist of, well, how does that make you feel? Or, it really is making a deep connection. And once you have that connection, you have access. And that's when the change happens. Connection allows access. And that's the $1 million answer right there.
That's really powerful. I love that you said that like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, Joel used to be a therapist. And is there anything more therapeutic than connection? I mean,
no.
you use the same thing when you were a therapist as you use as a life coach. The connection is like, it's the foundation for the whole thing. It's because it's a very therapeutic thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, one of the things that really blew me away and also sort of propelled me towards really making sure I felt like the message of what I was doing with the podcast crystallized along with like not just my personal brand, but values is I read the Surgeon General's report on loneliness, the loneliness epidemic. It's about 80 pages, but I think like maybe 20 of those are kind of like sources and bibliographical things. But it was profoundly impactful for a lot of reasons. I think it's amazing to witness what we can prove scientifically, how human connection elevates your livelihood, how it contributes to your longevity. It also, the statistic that rings in my brain constantly is that a lack of social connection is effectively the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Like, what? Like, nobody's, first of all, maybe like 20, 30 years ago, somebody smoking 15 cigarettes a day wouldn't be like completely shocking, but I feel like we're in a day and age where that is incredibly unrealistic to even witness that anymore. So we don't accept that anymore, but people are so challenged by the idea of creating strong connections. And it's like, I'm sure you guys have heard this plenty of times from other people or even felt it yourself. It's hard to make friends as an adult. If you're not working with people or you don't have these sort of forced social situations, where do you go to find connection? Well, we are in a time where connection opportunities to connect are abundant. In person is obviously more ideal, but at the same time, if you don't know where you belong, you have a lot of opportunities to try to figure that out. I mean, trial and error at worst case scenario. If you're feeling lonely, like, think about something that you care about and try to find a community of people that reflect that same value.
That's again, that's absolutely that. I do that all the time with people. Finding like-minded people, finding people to connect with. That is an antidepressant. That is really, that's the solution to so much. There's Meetup is a thing that you just go and you meet people and they have all these different things. I have people go take a cooking class, go take anything to get you connected. So many people have become so isolated, particularly post-pandemic, where the isolation was sort of perceived as necessary, and a lot of people never got past that. Losing connection is very sad. Your health deteriorates, as you're saying. I've read that report. It's really stunning how a loss of connection can really affect your life. Loneliness can affect your life. So the connection piece is sort of the core of everything. The perspective of the people around you, the people that energy you connect with someone. There's nothing more uplifting. That's the most exciting thing I do all week. I'm exhausted at the end of the day sometimes because you go into and I bring a lot of energy to my sessions. Yeah, and so every day I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a lot, but I love it. But it does. I mean, you bring it that way. It's incredible.
Well, so one thing I want to say, because I know while we're rounding
That's
out,
all right.
and I really want to be conscious
that's all
of
right.
time
We
for
can
you,
go over. No big deal. That's all right.
is that I think, to tie it back to hidden potential and the science of achieving greater things, we collectively, I feel, are in a time where people are starting to recognize our collective potential, and what we need to do is connect to actually achieve that. And so if we zoom out and we say, it's not just about me, it's not just about you, it's not just about that person achieving their potential, it's about, if we can recognize, if we can actualize, like you said, Walt, and then really come together with that actualization that we've achieved for ourselves, then it's really, what is our collective potential? And imagine how much we could do with that if we gave power to that. And I feel like there is the eternal optimist in me. I may have said this when we spoke last time, Walt, but it's like, I feel like a hopeless romantic for humanity. I'm like, I just believe that we can do better. Can we do better?
I think we're as hopeful romantics. I don't think we're hopeless. I think we're very hopeful.
There you go.
I really do.
I like that. Fair.
And one of the other things that I'm really into, one of my side hobbies is studying quantum theory, so quantum mechanics. So the entanglement, quantum entanglement, I think applies to human connection as well. You can become quantumly entangled with people, and in a good way, where you make that deep down connection, and there's a tangible energy that I have with certain people that I'm really close to, that I can almost sense when they're nearby. I can almost sense when they're not feeling well. I can look at some of my really good friends and I can just tell we're off a little bit today. And that really gets deep when you start looking at sort of the quantum theory behind that as well.
I also do that. This is going. Thank you, Walt, for this introduction. You will be getting an email about being a guest on my show, Joel.
I mean, I knew this was going to be good. I mean, it was just written. I'm glad that everybody else can see now what it was that I was seeing, because I was thinking, my God, we're not going to have her back once. She's going to be back with all those friends. Joel's going to be on her program. It's going to be like this great interface going on. There's one other thing I wanted to add in too before we wind up the conversation today, because you guys were talking about that loneliness report, which I have not seen, by the way. And it's probably a good thing. And that's really going to be the point that I'm making, because years ago, Martin Seligman, who's one of the founders of the positive psychology movement, wrote a book called Learned Helplessness, which I read half of before I became so totally depressed I couldn't finish the book. And I say that, I mean, it's funny, but it's also true. Because I was actually teaching myself to become helpless by reading How You Become Helpless.
Yes.
And my point is, it's always great to have information. But again, the selectiveness, I think, is where it becomes really, really important. That's the difference, from my perspective, between hidden and actual, between potential and actual. Actual happens when we're selective, when we select what we feel is the direction we need to go right at that moment, as opposed to what somebody else thinks that we should be doing, or what society says we should be doing, or what the theoretical syllabus says we should be doing. It's tying into what's going on. And by the way, by the by, when we do that, funny thing happens. That's when we start to make those other connections with other people. Those same connections that just start to fuel us. So it all becomes part of the same process. Deciding where we're going to give our attention turns into creating connections with others, which turns to everybody feeling energized and empowered.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I love that this was the direction of the discussion we went today. Thank you for picking this topic. This was super fun.
I can hardly wait to find out what's going to happen after, Nikki, you have Joel on your show. I mean, because I'm going to get a report. I'm probably going to get 2 reports, actually. I can hardly wait to find out what that report's going to be like. What I do know is this. We're going to have you back again. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I think I'm going to wait until you've had Joel on so you can have that experience, because I think you do need to hear the whole Joel story.
Yes, I'm very intrigued by what I've learned here.
It is a story that you'll be walking around for the next week with your jaw hanging down. It's that kind of a story. You're going to love it. But after you've had that story, that's when I want to have you back, because then I want to continue this kind of thing that we're doing here. I think it'll be even more meaningful at that point.
I love it. And we'll try to let you get a word in edgewise before minute 20.
Well, even if you don't, I'll just jump in. You know, that's what I was realizing after the first 20 minutes. Why are you staying quiet? Oh, yeah, that's right.
I try to empower
this is
people.
My show. I forgot.
I try to empower people that are in conversations with myself and friends who are very similar in the dynamic of just you're going to keep going. My wife included. She's like, I just feel like it's rude to. And I was like, no, you have to jump in. You got to think about it like double Dutch. You got to just gauge it. Go now. Just jump in, and we'll let you in. I promise.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, Joel, thank you for bringing this book to our attention, because it gave us a wonderful topic, and I'm glad you got a chance to meet Nikki as well. I'm just looking forward to the future collaborations. I think it's gonna be great.
Great. Thank you for having me. And Nikki, really enjoyed meeting you. We will be in touch.
Yes, absolutely. Likewise. Thank you both so much for this. This was a super fun way to spend the past hour. I really just loved the conversation, and I'm feeling all that energy flowing. It's good times.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.